To call to the order of the executive board meeting, if I could have a motion for the approval of the minutes. Do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Next, we will go into our board meeting. We have acknowledgements with Ms. Linda Leedy. Good morning, Ms. Leedy.
Good morning. The Juvenile Welfare Board believes that those who work to give children brighter futures deserve recognition. So today, we're honoring our newest Kids First awardee, an outstanding social service professional who consistently goes above and beyond to meet children's needs and put children first. Julie Menke, if you want to stand, Julie. Julie is a therapist with Suncoast Center, and she's been there for over 20 years. Her focus of late has been leading the Active Parenting Now classes, teaching parents healthy and effective parenting skills, as well as providing them with the knowledge needed to understand children's behaviors and family dynamics. In recent years, she's enhanced the parenting course by adding special sessions, one which has been really well received by the parent participants, and that's on child and adolescent suicide prevention. She's so good at what she does that parents often ask her to repeat or do additional sessions with her because they've learned so much and it's making a difference in their family. Julie has been a qualified clinical supervisor for decades. You can see she works hard. In this role, she provides therapeutic feedback and support to new therapists and has been pivotal in countless therapists' growth and journey towards licensure. Even outside this role, Julie takes every opportunity to support her coworkers and program teammates and volunteers to help lead social and support activities. If Julie finds a need in the community, she actively seeks solutions. And if one cannot be found, she works within her role to meet the family's needs. In addition to direct parent education and outreach and serving as a mentor, Julie does public education and outreach, for example, speaking to PTAs about suicide prevention and to community organizations about how they can support families within their own community. On a personal note, I was privileged enough to be able to present this award to Julie last week, and she was just so humbled and shocked that she was the winner, given all this illustrious career that she's had. She really warmed our hearts, and we're really happy that she's here because she's so deserving. So please join me in congratulating JWB's remarkable Kids First awardee. Do you have anything you want to say?
I'll just say thank you, of course, to the award very much, but also to JWB for supporting our agency and the work that I get to do for families that might not otherwise have access to some of these resources. So I just really appreciate it, because basically my whole career has been supported pretty much by JWB. So thank you all. I appreciate it.
Next, we have our consent items. If I could have a motion for approval.
Motion approved.
Second? All in favor? Any nays? Okay. Our next item is our action items, and the first one is the approval of committee council appointments by Ms. Garcia.
Good morning, Yadidis Garcia. I'm the Community Engagement Manager, and I'm here today to present two candidates for the South County Community Council. Kelly Roy, the Community Council Liaison for South County, couldn't be here today because she is actually facilitating the meeting this morning, and the two appointments are also attending the meeting. The first appointment is Bricia Lynn Bree. She has 8 years of experience serving individuals with developmental delays and life learning disabilities. Ms. Lynn has her certification as a registered behavior technician. She is earning a bachelor's degree in health services administration and a certification to be a community health worker, projected to graduate on May 2024. She is a community outreach partner for Pinellas County Schools Office of Strategic Partnership. Ms. Bree believes that she is part of the South County Community Council, and she is a product of the South Side of St. Petersburg and has faced similar challenges like children and families are facing today. She would like to be an advocate to empower children and families to thrive in our community. Our second appointment is Kimberly Escribanek, and they're testing my English today. Ms. Escribanek is a marketing professional with 20+ years in St. Petersburg. Her career is marketing has allowed her to have a profound impact on various organizations in St. Petersburg, including Boyd Hill Nature Park, Sunken Gardens, the Festival of Estates, and Pinellas Animal Foundation. At the Pinellas Animal Foundation, Kim met her mentor, John Marcy. Ms. Escribanek started Human Education Connection, which is a nonprofit that brings healing to abused animals and children through his Canines Helping Kids in Crisis program. In addition to serving children through Canines Helping Kids, Ms. Escribanek has worked with Family Resources serving homeless teens. Currently, she is the Foster Grandparent Program Coordinator for Seniors in Service, where she recruits, trains, and matches volunteers 55 years of age and older with teachers in grades K-3. She believes these volunteers are instrumental in the academic success of these children and often becomes the only adult they trust, as so many of these young people desperately need. Upon approval from the board, we will have 38 active community councils representing North, Mid, and South. Thank you, and I'm here if you have any questions.
Any questions? Do I have a motion for approval?
So move.
All in favor? Any opposed? So approved. Next, we have the approval of the Executive Board Committee recommendations. Oh, that's by me. As you all, I took myself on that one. As you all know, Beth received glowing reports this year, and all prior years as well, but this year especially, the reports were glowing, and the recommendation that came from the board was from the executive committee was a 7% raise, as well as an extension of her contract to September of 2028. And so I am very hopeful, given the comments and given the great job that Beth has done, that this board will approve the recommendations from the executive committee. Do we have any questions? What about a motion?
So
Can I
move.
make a comment real quick?
Yes.
Just thank you, Beth, for your continued leadership. We're so lucky to have you, and it's great to have someone that anywhere we go in the community, people recognize you for the work that you do, so keep up the good job. And I make a motion.
Okay. Do I,
I was just going to echo the same comments, and thank you for all that you do and helping me get acclimated to the board.
would you like to second that?
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Job well done, Beth. Got to put my sound back on. Next, we have the approval of personnel policy revisions by Ms. Linda Leedy.
Good morning. Linda Leedy, Chief Administrative Officer, Juvenile Welfare Board. I'm here today to present our recommended revisions to JWB's personnel policies. The revisions were really prompted by a change in the federal law, the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, and the purchase of a JWB van. But while we were messing around with them, we're like, oh, there's a few other things we should adjust. So based on some comments we've gotten from staff recently, some confusion issues, needed clarity, HR team, legal counsel, we made some other adjustments. In the board memo that you have, I highlighted the most substantive changes. You've also got a chart that delineates and redlines every single change. And then you've got clean copy and redline copy of the full set of personnel policies for the changes. I'm just going to touch on the bigger ones in the memo and would be happy to address any other questions you have. The Pregnant Workers Fairness Act is a new federal law that requires employers, including JWB, to offer reasonable accommodations for pregnancy, childbirth, and related medical conditions. unless it causes an undue hardship on the organization. It really was initiated, I think, nationally to facilitate women in jobs that were in call centers or manufacturing lines or retail where they weren't able to get the breaks they needed to go to the restroom more frequently. So really, that was where this started, and certainly we'll see how the case law plays out in this in the future. Ethics, conflict of interest, and outside activities. We've had some questions from staff and confusion related to the ethics and the conflict of interest. So we moved those together into one section. It looks like there's a lot of changes. There really aren't. We've just condensed them into one. And then we've added a new section called outside activities. And in both cases, we've added language that requires disclosure by staff. We've always had a disclosure form related to ethics and conflict of interest. But now that we are in a gig economy and there are more opportunities for employment outside of your main gig, which is JWB, we felt the need to be more specific and more clear on what employees need to share with their supervisor and with HR so we can make a decision as for approval or not. We've also amended our sick leave policy and expanded it to be clear that it includes mental and physical health conditions and allows employees 3 days to take care of a family member as defined in the policies. And then finally, we have a new vehicle policy because we have a new vehicle. Only those authorized within their position profile to drive it and then approved by our insurance carrier are able to drive the van. And then the rest of the policy deals with safety standards and pretty standard language. So with that, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Any questions? I have a comment. I want to say I did read over the red line changes, and I was thinking, what attorney helped them do this?
You know.
And honestly, we were trying to make it clearer. It just seemed better to separate it with the, legal requirements that all the JWB employees have as government employees. We were just trying to make it clear and simpler. Even though it looks redlined crazily, it really is not.
Job well done. Do I have a motion of approval? All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you very much. The next thing that we have is the approval for the removal of surplus and obsolete inventory, and that's by Ms. Laura Peel.
Good morning. I'm Laura Peel, the Director of IT, and I also oversee the facilities. And I'm here this morning to request approval of the removal of surplus and obsolete inventory. Per Florida statute 274.05, we're required to classify surplus equipment, including IT equipment, furniture, et cetera, and evaluate its effectiveness and usefulness for JWB. The list that you should have, the second page of your board memo, is what we are bringing to you today for removal. All of the items have been evaluated for its usefulness to JWB, and we've determined that all the items are obsolete, uneconomical, or inefficient. All of the items on the list have a zero net value. Just a couple of comments about some of them. The laptops we keep for 3 years, which is when the warranty essentially runs out. Most of the ones that we have, we move to a training card that we use for trainings within the building, and then other ones we take and donate to funded agencies. You'll also notice that there's a lot of furniture on this one. You'll see bookshelves, file cabinets, et cetera. Most of those items were actually donated to us by Chase Bank when we bought our 66th Street building back in 1995. So that's how old a lot of this furniture is. But the main thing, if you walk around the building, you'll see that most of the shelves and file cabinets are empty. And that's because we have moved to electronic records, so those items are really no longer needed anymore. So with that, if you have any other questions, I'd like to seek approval to remove these items.
Any questions?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we're to our presentation session, and we will have Ms. Laura Kruger-Brock and Ms. Megan Seal for the dashboard presentation.
Good morning. My name is Megan Seals, and I'm the Senior Manager of Performance and Evaluation here at JWB. And today I'll be co-presenting with Laura Kruger-Brock, our Chief Financial Officer. we'll be reviewing the JWB annual dashboard. This, as a reminder, is an annual performance review that we created to take a high-level look at each strategic focus area and their identified high-level metrics. So a couple of notes before we get started. You'll see that most of the charts trend till FY22, but in some exceptions, we have data for FY23. This is just a result of when the data is available. We always want to bring the most up-to-date information, and so if we were able to, we included FY23 data as well. So I'll go through each strategic result area, but as a reminder, again, this is a high-level review. So we do come back to the board throughout the year for more in-depth information on each strategic result area, specific programming types, how they're performing, and where we feel we have opportunities to improve. So first, school readiness. In this area, we look at the readiness for our participants as they enter kindergarten. We use the STAR Early Literacy Assessment, which aligns with the school district. This assessment is given 30 days within the entry of kindergarten. And what we see today for our FY22 results is that we have had an 8% increase, something to celebrate, right? While we know that we are still short of our goal of 90%. I think most of us know, looking at the data across the county and the state, that's a quite high goal. So we'll continue to work towards that, but we know that this increase is promising to see that we might be rebounding from the effects of COVID. The programs that are included in this area are early learning centers, our early learning support services like HIPPY, which is a home-based literacy program, and other areas like our School Readiness Match with our Early Learning Coalition. So school success. Our identified metrics here is the standardized assessment for the state on ELA, which is English Language Arts, and math. So lucky us, they decided to change the test. So we'll see through FY19 to FY22, these are scores reported on what was called FSA, the Florida Standardized Assessment Test. FY23 is going to be our first year of the new FAST test, which stands for Florida Assessment of Student Thinking. So the thing to note here is that although we want to, again, celebrate positive results, we see increases in ELA and math, we are using preliminary score ranges. And what that means is when they first release the test, they're using preliminary score ranges in order to compare to the old test. What is happening this week, again, lucky me, get to present the same week, is that they're retrofitting those scores to the new permanent scoring ranges. And so we will update this information, but we've been working closely with the district in discussions of how we think that will impact our results. And they're really believing that it would be a minor impact between 3 to 5%. So we don't expect significant changes. Again, it doesn't make this information meaningless because it allows us to compare to the previous years that we've had. And moving forward, we'll be able to trend the new test. Strengthening community. Here we're looking at providing meals to children. So this is through our hunger initiative. That's existed since 2015, and at this time we have over 50 partner agencies. You'll see in FY22, we have the greatest increase. We talked about that last year. That was over 500%, and that was a result of us responding to the impacts of COVID and economic status that our families were in. And so our investment increased significantly. As we moved to FY23, again, we were able to increase the meals that we were providing and broaden access to children and families. And this was through largely our contract with St. Pete Free Clinic and Pack-A-Snack. Here we have the prevention of child abuse and neglect, and we just brought this data to you recently, so you might recognize it. Our overall arching metrics for this area is that children are free of abuse and neglect during services, and children are free of abuse and neglect 1 year following services. This is an area that we consistently are very proud of. We're almost hitting our target at 100%, which is a high standard because that means it's perfect. However, no child being abused is acceptable, so we think that's appropriate. So you can see that this data continues to hold steady. The area that we focus on, because we know these programs work, is really how do we engage those families that we're missing, the highest risk, who are the most resistant to participate in services. And now I'll turn it over to Laura Kruger-Brock to review our JWB financial performance measures.
Good morning. Thank you. So this slide is demonstrating a few of the goals that the organization has established. So on the blue line, and the footnote, it didn't show on this particular slide, but it's on the front slide. The blue represents the percentage of administrative expenses as a percentage of total expenditures and fund balance. And our target is 6%, so we would like our administrative expenses not to exceed, the target is 10%. And we come in at 6%, so even though we are growing the total expenditures and growing, we're maintaining or trying to maintain that percentage at that reasonable amount. And as you know, over the last couple of years, we've continued to add full-time equivalents, but that's because we've added programs and we've added a lot of additional things, but we're maintaining that, that target. You'll notice that in the prior years, there's a little asterisk there, which means from fiscal 18 through fiscal 22, those numbers actually represent the audited financial statement numbers. So those numbers are, pretty much complete. For the current year, we've estimated fiscal 23 numbers. We're currently undergoing our audit. The auditors, Cherry Beckert, Holland, and they've started their field work last week. So we have done a lot of work in preparation for the audit, and that's why in your consent item today, you have an additional financial statement for fiscal year 23 for September 30. And that's because after all the year-end closeout, we've made several adjustments, we've booked a lot of accruals and so forth. So we've provided you with an updated preliminary September 30 financial, and you can see there's a lot more. All the reimbursements that have been submitted in October for September have been booked now and so forth. So you can kind of see those numbers, which are a little more enlightening. Having said that, you'll see that our percentage, which is the orange bar, that is a percentage of our fund balance as a percentage of total expenditures. Our target is 25%, which is a 3-month reserve. And back in fiscal 28, that reserve amount was 41%, which was substantial. And as you can see, due to COVID, due to the increase in rising in property values and property taxes, that number has grown significantly to where we were at 70%, which is what allowed for a lot of discussion to reduce our millage rate and to spend more and add more programs, which we did through our letter of intent and our workforce stabilization. So coming in for this year, fiscal 23, we're estimating that percentage to be 62%. So we are making headways, even though the property value ad valorem taxes increased this past year. We had significant earnings. If you looked at the income statement this year, we've had a significant amount of interest earnings, which in the past we've never really done that. I think this past year it was well over $3 million that we received in earnings, which is a good thing, but that adds to our reserves as well. So we're at 62%, which is getting there, but our target is to get that number down, obviously, to 25%. And I will turn it back to Megan or ask or field any questions that y'all may have today.
Any questions or comments from the board? Thank you. Now we will have a presentation on the impact of social media on youth and their mental health by Dr. Barbara Morrison-Rodriguez. And I think this is a timely subject matter given what I've been seeing and hearing in the news.
Good morning. Beth had asked me to prepare this presentation for the Health and Human Services Leadership Board, and she thought you might be interested as well. Let me just say that what I'm going to talk about today is based on my review of the literature for youth, and who I included in youth were elementary school children through teenagers. I just got several articles this morning, I'm on all these distribution lists, that they're starting to do research on the impact of social media and electronics on babies. So maybe sometime next year, Beth, I can get back on the schedule and share that research with you. They're finding that there are structural brain changes in the prefrontal cortex of the brain of children who are using a lot of electronic devices. So that old adage that an app doesn't substitute for a lap is something that we really need to pay attention to. Okay, so what do we mean by social media? In a broad sense, social media refers to interactions among people in which they create, share, and/or exchange information and ideas in virtual communities and networks. People, including teenagers and children, express feelings and experiences in virtual environments and become more aware of others' opinions and interests. Social media has become an integral part of our society and a ubiquitous presence in teens' daily lives. What are the utilization trends? According to the research studies that I looked at, 95% of teens 13 to 17 use social media. 49% of kids 8 to 12 use social media. 8th and 10th grade students spend an average of 3.5 hours per day on social media platforms. Greater access to smartphones is associated with higher use of social media platforms. Teenagers are motivated to use social media because they desire to expand their social networks, seek ways to be famous, have channels to express themselves, and expect to be acknowledged as unique individuals. I want you to stop and think for a moment. When you were a teenager and you had those goals that are in that fourth bullet, before the time of social media, how did you meet those goals? How did you form social networks? If you wanted to be well known, how did you do it? What were your channels to express yourself before the advent of social media? I want you to really think about that, because my opinion is the utilization trends of social media are more symptomatic of what is happening in our societies, in our communities, in our families, and the lack of opportunities as our structures have changed to interact one-on-one as human beings. When I was a kid, all of my friends and schoolmates that lived on my block were my social network. After school, we were out playing with them until the street lights came on. The street lights were when you came home, when it started to get dark. But we grew up with each other. We could count on each other. We knew which ones did this and which ones did that. So much of those natural networks have broken down the way that we live today. And my view is that social media has become the method of connection to substitute for that. So if we're concerned about social media utilization, if we want to reduce it to some degree, the question is, what is the alternative in the way that our societies are structured today? Okay, next slide, please. I wanted to look at utilization differences by demographics. Harms from social media were more apparent in teen girls, of which 45% said they felt overwhelmed by drama, and 28% said they felt worse about their own lives, compared to only 18% of boys. 30% of girls reported enjoying social media a lot, compared to 19% of boys. Boys spend more time playing online games, while girls are more attracted to sites for fashion, beauty, design, and sharing photos. and they are constantly comparing themselves to each other in each of those domains. Utilization differences by race. Race, ethnicity, more Black children and Hispanic Latino children reported that they enjoyed social media a lot compared to their white peers. That surprised me. I really thought that minority children use social media less. This suggested that is not the case. Socioeconomic status, 30% of children from families with annual incomes under $35,000 reported that they enjoyed social media a lot, significantly higher than children with incomes greater than $100,000. Now, when you look at the correlation of race and socioeconomic status, it's hard to unpack what's related to race and culture and what might be related to economics. Is it the fact that, for example, white children have more social resources to do other things, whereas social media becomes an access point for children who have fewer other kinds of resources? That might be one way to look at that. Next slide, please. Mental health effects. Let me say that the literature shows that there are both negative and positive effects of social media. So what are some of the mental health effects that are negative? Adolescents who use social media more than 3 hours per day face twice the risk of experiencing poor mental health outcomes. Numerous studies show that higher levels of social media use are linked to adverse mental health effects, specifically depression and anxiety, inadequate sleep, low self-esteem, poor body image, eating disorders, cyberbullying, sexting, and self-harm or poor health. What are some of the positive effects of social media? In some cases, social media provides social support from peers, which may be especially beneficial to marginalized young people, such as sexual and gender minorities. Social media can be helpful to find and share examples of positive coping and support from peers with similar lived experience. Social media-based mental health interventions may help young people seek help or professional care when needed, acting as a gateway to mental health services. And if, for example, they don't want their families to know that they are looking for that kind of support, social media is a gateway for them to do that. That has ups and downs to it, obviously, but if they're trying to be private about the pain that they're feeling, the anonymity of social media helps give them more access. Recommendations for mental health providers, and this is, I think, really important, is to add social media use to mental health screening tools in clinical settings. Okay, how much time do your participants, your program participants, spend on social media? Because it might be an indicator for you as to some of the issues in behavior and thinking that you're seeing. Conduct school-based universal mental health screenings that include social media use and related experiences. Promote social media literacy to help youth and teenagers use social media in a positive way, including time management and self-discipline, so when they know when to turn it off. Recommendations for parents, for patients and caregivers. Create, and actually I think that should be parents and caregivers, I'll correct that. Create a family media plan with agreed upon expectations to establish healthy social media use boundaries at home. I was sharing with the group that I have a basket at my front door, and when I have a family dinner, everybody's electronics goes into the basket. All right? As I tell them, none of you are emergency room physicians. If you don't get a call, no one's going to die. And what I found is that my son and his wife were discouraging my granddaughter, but all the while they're discouraging her. My daughter-in-law in particular is just, so everybody's stuff goes in the basket. Create tech-free zones and encourage in-person interaction by limiting the use of devices around bedtime, mealtime, and family time social events. Prioritize family relationships and person-to-person social interactions to build social skills and bonds. Model responsible social media behavior as children learn from what they see modeled at home. Next slide, please. Recommendations for technology companies. Conduct and facilitate transparent and independent assessments of impacts of social media products and services on children and adolescents. Prioritize user health and safety in the design and development of social media projects and services to minimize harm to children and adolescents. So that might mean, for example, blocking access to certain kinds of sites or linkages. Create effective and timely systems and processes to investigate requests and complaints from young people, families, educators, and others. Next slide, please. Public policy implications. Strengthen protections to ensure greater safety for children and youth interacting with all social media platforms, such as developing age-appropriate health and safety standards, higher standards of data privacy for young users, strengthening and enforcing age access minimums. Only children of certain age can get into certain sites. Tech companies should share data relevant to health effects of their platforms, which means, of course, they have to collect it. Support increased funding for future research on both harms and benefits of social media use and other technology platforms. There is a good example of a social media policy action at the federal level, and I could not determine whether this was passed, but if not, it certainly needs to be. And this was by Senator Edward Markey, which prohibits internet companies from collecting personal data on users ages 13 to 16 without parental consent. Because as we know, the social media companies make a fortune off of data sharing, demographic sharing for marketing and other purposes. So to limit that for youth age 13 to 16. Provide a ban that targets advertising to children and teens. Establishes a digital marketing bill of rights for teens and youth that ensures marketing and privacy through a division of the Federal Trade Commission. And I wanted to finally end, and this is in your handout as well, with some additional recommended readings for you. This is where I got my information, but what I did was just a high-level summary. The U.S. Surgeon General did a report on social media and youth mental health, which is just packed with terrific information. The American Psychological Association did a report in May of 2023, which was a health advisory and social media use in adolescents. And the Center for Public Education in 2022 did a report called Follow Me and Like My Beautiful Selfies. And that was really a very intensive study of adolescent girls and their use of social media and the comparison of body types and looks and all that kind of stuff, which has created a lot of problem for young people. So with that being presented, are there any comments or questions?
I do have a comment. I agree with the analysis as it relates to the uptick of the cyberbullying and the sexting. 95% of the cases in Pinellas County come to me for the sexting. And before, I would see them maybe once a month, maybe, 2 or 3 months go by. Now I can tell you just about every calendar. I have in their ordinance, I have a sexting case on my docket. It seems that St. Pete Police Department is the main agency that I'm getting the cases from. So I would assume that it's those schools in South County that are really looking into those cases, but it is an uptick. In some of the cases, it's a fine line between being the ordinance or the criminal charge. And so the officers are trying to keep it an ordinance for the kids' sake so that they don't have to come see me on the other end. but it is, it is young women. Most of them are young women, and so I do believe the whole body image and all of that thing does play a great deal when you're seeing the images on, social media. Don't realize that it's airbrushed, the filters, and all of the above. And so I think, and I tell every parent that comes in front of me with these young men and women that it is difficult. Even the best parents, it is difficult to see what they're doing because a lot of these are happening at the schools. So it's not happening in the homes. It's happening in the schools and then someone is telling. But it is, I do believe that this is a timely report and thank you for it.
You're very welcome. Any other questions? Okay, thank you for the opportunity.
Not a question, but I thought, one thing I thought that was important that you brought up at the last meeting was really for all of us adults to better understand the jargon, the communications, the dictionaries that are being used by the children as they're using the social media so that we can have a better impact and discussion with them about the issues that we have. And we can't overly insert our belief or our thinking about these without first understanding what they're really, what they're really doing and how they're communicating with each other and what those impacts can be. So I thought that was a major impact, and as well as you went from one side of the during the discussion, you went from one side saying we need to understand that, and the other side you put the basket out in front of your house and made everybody stay in there. So it's a way of trying to, we have to find that fine line and come together in this.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mr. McCurk. And the other thing that I would say is every generation has created their own jargon, deliberately so. Okay, that's how you keep the old people from finding out what you're talking about, right? But the thing is, it has escalated exponentially on the social media platforms just because you have more people participating in the creative process, so to speak, if you will. But I do think that that's true, and I think it's worth taking the time to listen. I find that the young people in my family are very guarded about sharing what those things mean because it's a code language for them, as it was for us when we were coming up. So, but I do think the more I think if the kids know that you really, really care about them and you're concerned, and that comes through with some sincerity, they will share with you. But this is a genie that's not going back in the bottle. And so the question is, how do we deal with it as an aspect of life in its current form? Because there's just no way we're undoing social media, in my opinion. So how do we live with it? How do we protect our children? And how do we use it in the most positive ways?
Yeah, and the other part of that as well is, as we were growing up, the people we looked up to, the people we emulated, we tried to, a lot of sports, professionals and the like. Well, now it's the influencers. It's now that, and we need to better understand those pieces of it, because although I think, and I've heard this from my grandkids and others, oh, you can make a lot of money being an influencer, and the question is no different than if you're a pro basketball player. Yeah, you can make a lot of money, but there's only a few of you in comparison. So understand what the impact is and what it will do to you if you're not the winner.
Yeah, and I think that's where some of the gender differences come in, because boys use social media less, and when they do, most of them are gaming. They're doing sports-like things just in virtual formats. Where the girls, I think, are really, really into when they talk about glamour and how they look, and do you think I'm beautiful and I'm comparing myself to you, that's where I think a lot more of that comes into play, why it seems to be more problematic for girls. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'd also be interested in seeing what the evolution of social media is pre and post COVID, because I think that social media, in particular for that age group, was really a huge lifeline for kids who were at home, who were locked down, and obviously we all understand and know that those social interactions are critical to development during those age groups, and they lost so much of that during COVID. So I think that part of what led to, I don't know, maybe the monster that social media is now, is the reliance that kids that age had on, in the past, from 2020 to 2022 or so. And then, now that reliance just continues because of how heavily they leaned on it during that time. The loss of those social skills, the loss of those social opportunities for them to develop and build those relationships that they would have leaned on into college or into adulthood. So that is kind of a sector of that information that I'd be interested in seeing, what the difference is between how kids approached social media prior to that. And I'm a little younger than everybody else here, but, Facebook first came out when I was a freshman in college, and it was the very first year that Facebook was created, because I went to college in Boston and that's where it was created. So it was non-existent until I was already 18. And I think that for the generation that was 18 and up when social media was created, it has become something that forges and strengthens the connections that you had as a child. Whereas the teens and the younger kids who had social media, through that development, it's become more of a crutch. So I think that is kind of a little piece of that information that I'd be interested in.
Yeah, I think that's a very astute observation. And kind of the gens, when you go with the gens, what social media meant to each of the gens. But I just want to share with you that the television was developed during my lifetime. And I can remember my parents and grandparents having this conversation about what the effect of TV was going to be. You know what I mean? It's always, whenever there's an innovation, there's always the old people, what is that going to mean, for the kids? It's just that the rate at which these technologies are escalating is so exponential. And it's just changing rapidly all the time. But that's a very astute observation.
Dr. Kendrick, your mic was on first.
Yeah.
Just maybe a positive that has come out of this is children are, as they look at other social media of their peers, they are reporting things that are concerning to them. We receive dozens and dozens of tips every day in our Sandy Hook Promise hotline for suicide prevention and for weapons, where students are seeing these things and they're reporting them. And so teaching responsible use is important. And I know this was brought up at the Health and Human Services Leadership Board. 86% of a child's year is spent outside of school. And so schools have a part in this, but it's definitely families, the community, and others who can also help to teach that responsible use.
Yeah, that was one of the positive things of social media that came out in the literature. And of course, the young people who see this have to feel responsible enough to report it, which is the point that you're making. And I think that's part of the orientation that we can do, is if you have friends that you know who are in trouble or who are in pain, if they're your friends, be sure you tell a responsible adult about it. Certainly would help with the gun thing. Yeah.
Ms. Rutland?
Yes, thank you. This was a very, very enlightening presentation. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I think that there is a need for balance. Obviously, this is what you've brought to light here today. And I wonder if there is a way to use social media to our advantage, because when I was growing up, we spent time outside. And I wonder if there's some sort of social media campaign for spending more time outside that we could start, because really I think that's what it's going to take, is use their language to communicate in the way that they're communicating, and perhaps try to start something new.
Yeah, well, I think it's one maybe to recruit kids who might be, but there's the opportunity, there's also how they get there, their time for participation. I think that and I'm going to end where I started, I think the reason that they're inside so much is because the opportunities for outside interaction have reduced.
Or they don't think about
it. Given the way that we live today. Like I told you, we spend all our out-of-school time after homework in the street.
Agreed.
It was outside our houses, but all the kids were in the street playing ball and doing all. Now, the thing is very hard to play ball if you're holding a cell phone.
Right. Well, it's something to think about, but I definitely feel like if we somehow facilitate a campaign or something of outdoors and reminding people what it's like, what the games are, how to play them, those kinds of things, getting back to our roots.
I sure think it's worth a try. It is definitely worth a try. And it would help with a number of things. I mean, kids are under-exercising and everything else because of the kind of lifestyle that we have now. So it's certainly worth consideration. And it may be something that we can mention to some of our youth-serving programs, like their after-school programs and things like that.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna go to
Yeah,
Ms.
just
McCurdy.
following up with, at the Health and Human Services meeting that we had, and we'll be putting together an overall plan of how we move forward. One of the things that was clearly brought up is a need to get some focus groups put together, to talk to the children and the groups that are out there and get a better understanding. One, learn the jargon. Two, realize that Facebook, by the way, now is an old person's thing, because the kids are using other things. And, we need to try to pull that set of information together and then create the plan. Because part of the fear as well is you look at going outside was great, and as a parent and as our parents and our kids, we knew who they were with. When they're playing games, and many of which are war games or battles, are like, we don't know who they're on with. And it may be somebody that we don't want them on with, but we can't really tell because they're individually, apart. And so we need to really put our heads together, and I think I kept saying at the meeting, history repeats itself, and you just described from that point with your parents with TV, we're now looking at it from a standpoint of social media technologies, which have driven the change even more so, and it adds more complexity, but it should also provide a lot of added benefit if we can come to grips with those issues.
And then just following up on that as well, because, Facebook is an old people thing. As a parent of young children, but as a part of the generation that grew up with as an adult, social media, I think that another way that we can kind of look at that is talking to parents of young children about how to address social media. Because I can see personally the way that I'm talking to my oldest is 9, and then I have a 5-year-old and a 4-year-old. So the way, obviously my 9-year-old is just starting to get to the age where he's kind of independently using some of that technology, and the way that we address these internet issues with him or social media issues is entirely different than my parents addressed it with me, in terms of the phone or, I can't remember, obviously my parents never had a conversation with me about social media because it didn't exist back then. But I think that is, talking to younger parents, talking to parents who have children aging up into that age group is about how to speak to their children, almost in the way that, when they're too young, like talking to a 9-year-old about social media so that when he gets to 13, 14, 15, it's not like you're talking to a teenager about how to do something they've already been doing for 5 years. And I think that is a really important avenue that is open to us at this time, because parents want to know how to deal with these issues that we know are coming up and how best to address them.
Beth?
I just wanted to sort of pick up on a couple of comments that there is such a thing as the Health and Human Services Leadership Board that has been in the community for well over a decade. And it is comprised of 3 members from this board, 3 members from the school board, and 3 members of the county commission plus the sheriff. And that group met a week ago, a week and a half ago, time flies, with this subject as a primary subject. And so we heard, for instance, Dr. Barbara's presentation. We also heard a presentation from Jennifer Katzenstein from All Children's, and sort of to level set our knowledge about the pluses, the minuses, the risks, and so on. With the question of whether or not and how that group representing the entire community, because as Superintendent Hendricks said, the schools got those kids certain hours of the day. Families have the kids certain hours of the day. The kids are other places certain parts of the day. What are the messages we might want to send? What are the impacts we might want to make as a whole community? And the group decided that in all their wisdom, you know what, we're not in the generation we're wanting to talk to. So the first thing we need to do is listen to kids and see what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what interventions they think might make sense. So that is the next step from that group. What will result, I don't think any of us have any idea. It's not nearly as simple a campaign, for instance, as Sleep Baby Safely, where it's, alone on your back in a crib. It's, boom, 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 1, 2, 3, and it's really important and it's really hard to do it consistently, but the message is fairly clear as to what you need to do or not do. And it's just not the case with social media. It's a lot more complex. It comes from a lot of different directions. Everything from, what hours and when kids have access to a device, how old should they be when they get a phone, but far beyond that, what are they allowed to watch? What else, to Melissa's point, what else are we drawing them out to do otherwise so that they're inspired and they enjoy other interactions that are healthy in a whole variety of ways for them, healthy socially and physically for them. So we don't know where that's going to go. We're also going to be doing research across the country to see what else is out there. Have there been either school-based or community-wide efforts to tackle this in some manner? It's evolving, every day, so it's not a fixed thing. A lot of the energy for that and putting it on the HHSLB agenda came from Laura Hine, chair of the school board, but this is not a school board only effort. Kevin, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding there's a fair amount of whatever one might want to call it, but good digital citizenship sort of embedded in curriculum here and there. It's not necessarily a whole module that's about that, but much like we might have learned library science and how to go look up things, that's already in there. It's not a whole new thing, and the school board is in serious conversations about what actions they might or might not take. So we'll report back to you, but we had this presentation because I also wanted to make sure we didn't leave this board behind in the discussion. Yeah.
I just also want to add that, JWB hosted youth town halls for the last 12 to 15 months. And in each one of those town halls, we did ask the youth about social media. And in some cases, there was a panel. We are now pulling all that data together from those town halls, which will support, to see if there's themes, and then support the next focus groups that we have.
So I just want to add on, the other aspect we need to look at is educating the parents as well, right? So are the kids really stuck on social media because parents just don't care and that's the easy way to get rid of them, do your thing, not pushing them outside? Or the parents scared the kids shouldn't be outside because it's more dangerous outside? One is high in St. Petersburg back then. So things have changed. And things, evolution has happened and we've changed. Our county is growing and we've more people now than ever living in Pinellas County. More people moving in more than ever in Pinellas County. So maybe we really need to talk about, educating the parents about how important it is to get your kids outside, get them involved in recreational sports. We have all kinds of recreational stuff that's free to children to play, some that are, cost a little bit of money, like club sports stuff. I know that for me, my one daughter, her kids get 30 minutes a day on their phone. That's it, period. Rest of the time, outside, go play. And they're outside, they're playing basketball, they're throwing footballs, they're doing what they need to do as children and learning to be outside and be active with their neighbors. So I think that we need to truly also look at the other aspect of this thing. We need to educate the parents how important it is for these kids to get outside. And what the damage is potentially damage being done by just letting them be home all the time, stuck on their cell phone or on their iPad or on their Xbox or their Nintendo, whatever. That's damaging for the kid. We're not teaching them to be outside and be social. We're not teaching them to go outside and play with other children and have buddies and friends and groups and stuff like that, like we all did as we were kids. So I think we need to keep that aspect in mind too as we're moving forward with looking at the problems with social media.
Beth, may I comment on that? I think some of the gender differential you see is related to what you're talking about. We do not have as many physical activities outside for girls. We're seeing more development with soccer, for example. It's becoming, we have female soccer stars and stuff like that. But I think we need to focus a little bit more on creating those kind of opportunities for girls. It's still very, very disproportionate. And there's still parents who believe that, girls shouldn't get out and be sweaty and stinky and all of that kind of stuff. So, there's a little bit of that kind of bias as well. But I think it's good for them mentally, physically, and then they learn to compete in groups, which helps all the way up the career ladder. My son talks about this all the time, how his exposure to athletics has really helped him on his job, how to negotiate differences, how to follow direction, how to engage people. He felt that he learned all of that from sports. So we need those same kind of activities for girls. I agree with you.
I have a couple of comments now after listening to everybody. I'd like to start with you, Barbara, if I may. In that regards to that comment for girls, I can think of camps for golf, sailing, soccer, basketball, volleyball, softball for girls. And maybe that goes back to Chief McMillan's comment and just educating the parents on what opportunities exist in our county already to get outside and spend time and interact with kids their age. And I would be all for that sort of campaign to help educate parents what opportunities exist.
I can tell you as a softball mom, there is a gap. 10-year-olds, you can find, for free. They start competing and you can't find it for free from about the 12-year-old on up, and it costs to be in travel ball. The leagues have dropped off as it relates to free softball for girls. And so that's the problem. And as a past travel ball mom, I spent as much on my daughter's travel ball as I did for her college education. The older you get, the further it is that you go. And so that's the problem. We're losing the free sports because kids are now in those travel leagues. So it's easier said than done. They're falling off. They're not competing in the everyday recreational sports because guess what? They say that you're seen if you're in travel leagues, and it costs money.
And to the judge's point, there's not the access to facilities in Pinellas County for girls as there are for boys. And with anybody that has, I don't have kids, but anybody that has girls that play softball knows that it's a lot harder to find softball fields around here than it is baseball fields. Baseball fields are plentiful. So.
Well, that leads right to your report, Ben.
Great discussion. On November 29th, I had the privilege of presenting to the Pinellas Legislative Delegation to offer our expertise and our resources as their JWB. At that point in time, I didn't have an ask of them, but rather wanted to remind them who we were, what we did, and the fact that we have a lot of resources like our mapping capabilities and the Child Opportunity Index that might be of help to them as they went along, and to inform their decision-making, be responsive to their needs, offer timely data, and be a one-stop shop for all things kids. If we don't know, we can connect with somebody who does know. About a week or so later, I was a member of a small group organized by the Tampa Bay Partnership to meet with Sarasota Representative Fiona McFarland, who is proposing a bill this session to implement a tax credit for up to $300 per employee for employer-provided childcare. Now, whether that's the best mechanism or not to be supporting that, it's a step in the right direction, and we'll see how that goes. JWB continues to take steps to foster a supportive and healthy workplace in a whole variety of ways. And one of the things we are constantly doing is seeking out new tools and best practices in order to do that. So this month, we will be participating, our employees will be participating in the Best Places to Work program offered by the Tampa Bay Business Journal. Now, this is less about us being designated a best places to work, although that would be delightful, but more because it's a very evidence-based, helpful tool that is available to us, and it is all anonymous back to JWB, but we can get really good information about what our employees are feeling, seeing, what they think is helpful, where we think we fall short, what else we think we can do. As I said, a top score in our category would qualify us for Best Place to Work designation, and yes, that would be an honor and delightful, but our real objective is engaging the health and culture of our own organization, and in particular, finding areas in which we can learn and do better. The community councils are busy, busy, busy. They are hosting holiday events for families. As a reminder, we invite you to join those community councils and staff for various holiday events taking place this month to benefit kids and families. Yaya and others have been keeping wish lists for a number of families that each of the community councils are supporting. So we have some offices here that look like small, toy stores with things already that have already been purchased and wrapped and donated, and a lot of the employees from JWB have picked one or many things on those wish lists and have already purchased those, and they're wrapped and ready to go. If you're interested in attending any one of those, you can contact Olivia, and she can let you know the when and the where. We're now accepting nominations for the 2024 Dillinger McCabe Leadership Award. The submission deadline is February 16th, at which time the selection committee will convene to select this year's recipient. Just as a reminder, the selection committee consists of members of the Dillinger and McCabe families, Board Chair Moore, immediate past Chair Mike McCurrick, and Legacy Board Member Dr. Jim Sewell. So all nominees will be recognized at the event, at the Kids First Luncheon event, and the winner will be announced at that event on April 26th. So the nomination criteria and the online form can be found under awards on our website, or I'm gonna be cheesy and say, or you can call Olivia and she can make sure she can get you to the right place if maneuvering our website is not to your liking. So that's all I have, except to say I'm really excited to be here, and I'm excited to sign another contract to be here longer. It continues to be a privilege, and I think we've done an amazing job over this last year and last 4 years, but it's not enough. There's more, and there's always more that we can do as a group, as a board, and I appreciate your support. Thank you.
We're at the informational items. Does anyone want to have conversation about those items? If not, do we have any public comments? And so now we're back to our anniversaries and milestones. Ms. Houghton?
We have 2 anniversaries. Elaine Melchiotti, 1 year. Wave to the crowd, Elaine. And Glory Rosario, 2 years.
Open agenda, any comments, concerns? A motion for adjournment?
So moved.
All in favor? No, nobody opposed. Have a great day and happy holidays, everyone.